Hey everyone, so I am back out here doing the Cabin Fever Challenge. In this context, it's a little bit unofficial. We're not actually recording the scores because I've already done my submissions, but my friend Dan and I wanted to come out and try it out with some different firearms that I don't think have ever been run through the Cabin Fever Challenge before. So first up, we did a rifle, which you've seen on the channel before. We have a full video on this Krag Jorgensen. We believe this one was, I think, 1901. So this old girl's over 100 years old, and once we figured her out, you know, she ran pretty well. But there's things that we like when we did the video on this. We talked about the difference between loading this under stress versus loading it in a range condition. And we were having a pretty easy time loading it when we did the review of this because we're just, you know, on the range shooting it. However, once you throw a clock in the mix and you know you're under time, that's when things start getting a little bit more fiddly and a little bit less cooperative. So that was one thing both Dan and I ran into, where in theory, this loading gate is great. You pop open the side, and if you want to know more, just watch the dedicated video on this. I don't want to go too deep into it now. But theoretically, you can just drop the rounds in, close it up, and you have 5 rounds ready to go. If you want, you have the magazine cut off, you can single load it and then switch over when you need to. And theoretically, that's great. However, as we both found out, under stress, that process becomes a lot more difficult. And I'm sure if we were, you know, soldiers in 1902, 1903, still running these things in the Spanish-American War or whatnot, and we were practiced with it, we'd probably be a little bit smoother with it. But still, there's a lot more fine motor skills required to load something like this. And that's something that you only learn when you're under the clock or in some sort of stressful environment. Obviously, neither of us were getting shot at, but still having that clock is one of those things that just ups that stress level a little bit and makes you really appreciate things like good stripper clip feeding or magazine feeding. It really does make a difference. So that leads me into the second gun we were shooting today, which, let me grab that one. So here I have pop quiz. Go ahead and pause this video if you know what this is just by looking at it. Throw it in the comments. Don't cheat. Wait for me to actually say what this is. This is a G41. A G41. This was one of the semi-automatic rifles fielded by the Germans during the war. Later got redesigned into the G43. They changed up some of the action here. Functioned slightly differently, the gas system. But this thing, man, it looks like the front end especially, the way it works, it just almost looks like something out of Star Wars, this whole front end. But this thing fires 8mm Mauser, and you can still use your regular K98 style stripper clip, which compared to almost any other stripper clip is just a dream. And we're using specifically like the Swedish Mauser stripper clips, which are even more of a dream. Not that 8mm Mauser stripper clips are bad in general, but even nicer. And you'll see that from just the footage of me shooting this thing. But I gotta say, I was really surprised, because if you've ever shot 8mm Mauser, you know that it is a very potent cartridge. It's going to be, what, 196, 198 grains of pure whoop-ass. 198 grains of pure whoop-ass, as we were saying. And it's really not painful to shoot in this. And I'm not saying it's painful to shoot in a K98 or my M48 Mauser, for people who get mad at me calling my Yugo Mauser a Mauser. But in my Yugo, it's not painful to shoot, but it's not something you want to be shooting all day. This was surprisingly pleasant. Now, you'll see it pushing us around quite a bit, but that's really all it was a push. You definitely, it pushed you off target, but again, we put 20 rounds through this thing, each of us, in pretty quick succession, and I feel like I could shoot this a lot longer and still feel just fine with it. So it was also just a really cool experience to be able to actually shoot one of these and hold these in our hand. And he actually brought out, Dan brought out his G43 also, so we were kind of looking at the similarities and differences between this and the G43. But just a really, really cool experience. And this specific rifle might show up on another YouTuber's channel in the near future, but I'll go ahead and just tease that for now. But should be pretty cool. I'm pretty excited for Dan on that one, along with one of his other rifles, which we don't have out here today. So I'll put links to those videos and be a little bit less cryptic once those videos come out. But really, this was just a fun experience. And again, one of the things that I encourage people to run this challenge for is there's a big difference between shooting on a square range, stationary shooter at stationary targets. It's a whole different thing even once you start adding the tiniest modicum of stress in the way of a clock. Once you know that a clock is running, no matter how much stress it adds stress to any other type of shooting you're going to do on a flat range shooting at stationary targets. So again, we noticed the fiddly reloads with that Krag that make way more sense why they would immediately want to go into something like the 03 Springfield and make the Krag the shortest U.S. service rifle in history. Second shortest. M14's the shortest as far as it's still in service, but it wasn't issued en masse for very long. Neither was the Krag. So Krag is number 2 behind the M14. But it makes sense that it was the main service rifle for such a short period of time, because again, you start adding stress in. We were under the clock. If we have people shooting at us, that's just going to go out the window, and we're just going to start dropping rounds like crazy. So again, makes you understand why we went on to things like stripper clip feeding and things like the K98, 1903 Springfield, G41, and then even with the G43, start going into swapping out magazines instead of stripper clip feeding, up to the modern magazine, box magazine fed guns like this AK-47 mag here. So again, I would really encourage you guys to go out and at least run through this Cabin Fever Challenge. I think it's a really good experience for people who aren't used to this type of shooting. Again, I would only encourage you to do it if you can competently and safely move through the different positions and complete the reloads in a safe manner. But if you do feel comfortable with that, it's a really good thing to practice with, because again, under that even tiny bit of stress, things change drastically, and it gives you much better familiarity with yourself and better familiarity with the firearm that you're using. And again, it also, in this specific case, is an excuse to come out here and do it with some pretty cool rifles. I think I got like 8 or so hits with this one, depending on how you score it. So not as good as I do with my AK-74, but I think that's kind of to be expected with this. Although this thing has a really, really nice trigger. I was not expecting that. So
full power.
Yeah, and a full power battle rifle cartridge versus 5.45, which is just, you know, just pecking at your shoulder. This thing is pushing you in the shoulder. So again, it was just a really fun experience to come out here, and we got a couple other fun rifles that we're going to be shooting. We're going to be doing a video on his P14 Enfield, which I love that thing. I've shot that thing before, and I love it. But we'll be doing a dedicated video on that, so look out for that. We also have his 03 Springfield that we're going to be shooting out here, and just it's going to be a fun day with some milsurps. So again,
K98 just for fun.
K98 out here just for fun, because why not? I mean, you got a K98, why not bring a K98 out?
Yugo K98.
It's a Yugo Capture K98. This one is a Mauser, because it's a German K98, but it has a Yugo stamp on it, whereas my Yugo Mauser, you know, was actually made in Serbia. So again, just get out here, have some fun, burn through 20 rounds in a manner of shooting that you probably don't get to do very often. And you're not only going to learn stuff about your gun, but you're going to learn stuff about yourself and where you need to improve. And I think that's the biggest thing for us shooters, is knowing, A, that we have room to improve and where those areas are. And again, this is not the end-all be-all of firearms competition, but it's a good way to get your feet wet and start opening your eyes to areas that you might be lacking in and need more practice in. So while you may not have a gorgeous Gewehr 41 to do this competition with, do it with what you got, and again, I think you're going to have a good time with it. So again, I hope to see all your entries before the end of March. At the end of this month, that's the end of submission entries. So go ahead, get them in there, upload them to Facebook, upload them to YouTube, post a link to Facebook. If you don't have a Facebook, directly email me or Rifle Chair, and we'll get you included. Again, it's just a good time, good excuse to have some fun with your guns. And anyway, with all that said, as always, I hope you got something out of this video, and I really appreciate you watching. So much more exhausting, I feel like.
Doesn't it feel nice?
Yes. It's heavy, but it's nice. All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
I think I would have rather still had an STG-44, but I think I would have. That's why we have AK-47s now. And you were doing dead holds with this? Okay. One of those is not exactly intentional. It's got a light trigger. Felt okay. Felt better than the Krag did. I felt more confident about a lot of those. That trigger, it's not very heavy.
No.
This really gets fiddly when you're trying to do it on the clock. I know so many of those are off. See how we did?